The stars trembled when they spoke his name. In the dark corners of space stations, alien traders whispered stories that made their skin crawl. Children of a dozen different species had nightmares about the White Panther. He was death itself. Moving through the void in his terrible white ship, Captain Lee Duan stood on the bridge of his warship Baiko, watching the stars streak past. His crew worked quietly around him. Had learned long ago that their captain did not like noise. When he was thinking, the ship moved through hyperspace like a ghost, leaving no trail for enemies to follow. "Captain," said Park Sun-mi from her station. She was his tactical officer, a woman who could read battle patterns like others read books. "We are getting close to the target zone," Duan nodded. His face showed no emotion, but his crew knew that look. It was the face he wore before a hunt. The White Panther was ready to strike again. Far away, on the water world of Aquatica Prime, Ambassador Velnara swam in nervous circles. The tide swimmers were a peaceful people who lived in great underwater cities. It never wanted to hurt anyone. But now they faced a terror they could not understand. "Show the footage again," Velnara said to her aide. The holographic display flickered to life, showing the wreckage of a pirate fleet. Twisted metal floated in space like broken toys. Not a single pirate ship had survived the attack. The humans did this in less than 10 minutes, the aide said. His gills fluttered with fear. They gave no warning, and they showed no mercy. Velnara watched the footage with growing dread. The human ship had appeared from nowhere, moving with deadly grace. The pirates had tried to run, but the White Panther was faster. His weapons cut through their shields like they were made of paper. "We must warn the Galactic Council," Velnara said. "These humans are not like us. They do not seek peace. They only bring death." On the crystal world of Shardhome, the crystalline being called Humkos was having similar thoughts. The Shard speakers could feel vibrations through their bodies. And right now, those vibrations spoke of fear. Every crystal in the city was singing the same song of terror. "The White Panther has struck again," Humkos told the gathered elders. "A smuggling ring that was selling sentient beings as slaves. He destroyed them all." The elders vibrated with worry. They had recordings of the human captain's voice, cold and empty of feeling. When he spoke, it was only to demand surrender. Those who refused died quickly. "Perhaps," said one elder, "we should be grateful." "The smugglers were evil." "Evil or not," Humkos replied, "the humans show no difference between guilty and innocent. They are a plague spreading through our galaxy." Back on the Baiko, Duan reviewed the intelligence reports. His ship was hunting slavers now, criminals who captured alien children and sold them to the highest bidder. The thought made his jaw clench with anger, but his face remained calm. "Sir," said Kim Tae-ho, his chief engineer, "the engines are running at full power. We can be at the target location in 6 hours." Duan nodded. Tae-ho was a good man, quiet and efficient. He kept the ship running smoothly, never asking questions about their missions. The captain liked that about him. Communications officer Choi Yujin looked up from her station. "Sir, I am picking up alien chatter about us. They are very afraid." Duan said simply, "Fear keeps them honest." Yujin frowned, but said nothing more. She had served under the captain for 3 years, but she still did not understand him sometimes. He seemed to enjoy being feared, but she had seen him stare at the stars with sadness in his eyes. On Earth, in the military headquarters buried deep under the Korean mountains, Director Yoon Jae-soon read the latest reports with mixed feelings. The White Panther was effective, perhaps too effective. Every mission succeeded, every enemy was destroyed, but the cost was growing. "Sir," said Lieutenant Han So-young, his aide, "the alien networks are full of stories about Captain Duan. They call him the Deathbringer, the Star Killer, the White Demon." Yoon sighed. "What do they say about humanity?" "That we are a species of monsters," So-young replied quietly. "That we will destroy everything we touch." Yoon looked out the window at the peaceful Korean countryside. Children played in the fields, their laughter carrying on the wind. These were the people he was trying to protect. But was he creating more enemies than friends? "Keep monitoring the alien communications," he said. "If they unite against us, we will need to know." In the depths of space, The Baiko dropped out of hyperspace near a small moon. The target was there, hidden in the shadows. A space station. Where the worst criminals in the galaxy met to trade in living beings, Duan studied the tactical display. The station was heavily armed, protected by shield generators and automated defense systems. It would be a difficult fight, but not impossible. "Stations prepare for battle," he ordered. His crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had done this many times before. Park Sunmi targeted the station's weapons. Kim Tae-ho pushed the engines to full power. Fusion jammed the enemy communications. They worked together like parts of a machine, deadly and precise. The stations. Defenders saw the white ship approaching and panicked. They had heard the stories too. The White Panther had come for them, and they knew what that meant. "This is Captain Lee Duan of the human warship Biko." Duan's voice cut through space like a blade. "You are surrounded. Surrender now, and you will live. Resist, and you will die." The alien criminals looked at each other with fear in their eyes. Some wanted to surrender, but their leader, a cruel being called Saxton, refused to give up without a fight. "We have shields," Saxton snarled. "We have weapons. Kill the human." The battle was short and brutal. The Baiko moved like a dancer, avoiding the enemy fire while striking back with deadly accuracy. One by one, the station's defenses fell. The shields collapsed, the weapons were destroyed, and the criminals realized they had made a terrible mistake. "Please," they begged over. "The radio? We surrender. Do not kill us." Duan looked at the broken station and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Another nest of criminals was destroyed. The galaxy was a little safer for innocent beings, but he did not know that this mission would be different. Deep inside the station, in the darkest corner of the holding cells, a small alien child was crying for her mother. And that child would change everything. The mining world of Kepler 442b was a place of red dust and broken dreams. Two pale suns hung in the orange sky, casting long shadows across the rocky landscape. Deep underground, something evil was growing like a cancer in the darkness. The insectoid. Hivesworn had claimed this world 3 years ago. They came in great swarms, their chittering voices promising prosperity to the local government. But promises were cheap, and the Hivesworn were liars. Queen Voizikdara stood in the center of her fortress hive, her 6 arms moving in complex patterns as she gave orders. Her compound eyes glittered with greed as she watched the mining. Reports flow in. The planet was rich with rare metals, and her slaves worked day and night to dig them up. "The production is good," she clicked to her lieutenant, a smaller insect called Kixar. "The soft skins work well when they are properly motivated." Kixar rubbed his mandibles together nervously. "My queen, there are reports of human ships in this sector. The other hives are worried." Ziktara's head snapped toward him, her antennae twitching with anger. "Humans? Here? Impossible? This world is too far from their territory." But Kixar had seen the intelligence reports. The White Panther was hunting again, and his prey was anyone who dealt in slaves. The Hivesworn had captured workers from a dozen different species, keeping them in dark tunnels far below the surface. "My queen," Kixar said carefully, "perhaps we should move the operation. The humans are known to be very violent." Ziktara struck him with one of her clawed arms, sending him sprawling across the floor. "Coward, my hive is strong. Act. Let the humans. Come, we will crush them like the insects they are." Far above, in the cold darkness of space, the Baiko drifted silently toward the planet. Captain Duan stood in his ready room, studying the reports that Sergeant Lim Minho had brought him. The intelligence was solid. The Hivesworn were using slave labor, and some of the slaves were children. Duan's hands clenched into fists. As he read the details, the Hivesworn had raided peaceful worlds, taking families from their homes. They separated parents from children, using the threat of harm to keep everyone working. "Sir," said Lim Minho, "we have confirmed the location of the main mining complex. It is heavily fortified, but nothing we cannot handle." Duan looked at the tactical display. The Hivesworn had built their fortress well, with shield generators and automated gun towers. But they had made one mistake. They had put all their defenses above ground. "What about underground?" Duan asked. The mining tunnels go deep, Lim, Minho replied. Very deep. But the slaves are kept in the lower levels. If we attack from above, the insects might kill them all before we can reach them. Duan nodded slowly. This mission would require more than just firepower. It would require precision and speed. The lives of innocent beings depended on getting this right. Prepare the assault teams, he ordered. We go in fast and hard. Number, mercy for the slavers. On the bridge, Park Sun-mi was already working on the attack plan. Her fingers danced across the tactical display, marking targets and calculating firing solutions. She had done this many times before, but each mission was different. Captain, she said, as Duan entered the bridge, the planet has natural magnetic fields that will interfere with our sensors. We'll be fighting partially blind. Then we use our eyes, Duan replied. Kim Taho, can you get us through their shields? The chief engineer looked up from his station. Yes, sir. I can overload their shield generators with a focused energy burst. But it will only give us a few minutes before they come back online. A few minutes is all we need, Duan said. Choi Yujin jammed their communications. Do not want them calling. For help, Eugene nodded and began working at her station. She had become very good at cutting alien communication systems. The Hivesworn would be fighting alone. Deep in the mining tunnels, a small alien child pressed herself against the cold stone wall. Her name was Soft Petal, though the insects who had taken her did not care about names. She was only 5 years old, barely more than a baby by the standards of her people. Soft Petal belonged to the moss-touched, a gentle species that lived in harmony with the plants of their forest world. They were peaceful beings who had never hurt anyone, that had not saved them from the Hivesworn raiders. She remembered the day the insects came. The sky had turned black with their ships, and her parents had hidden her in the root cellar. But the insects had found her anyway, dragging her away from everything she knew. Now she worked in the dark tunnels, her small hands bleeding from handling the sharp rocks. The insect guards clicked their mandibles at her when she moved too slowly, and she had learned to be very quiet. Above ground, the Baiko dropped out of hyperspace like a falling star. The white ship gleamed in the light of the twin suns as it approached the planet. On the surface, Hivesworn sentries saw the vessel and began screaming warnings. Human ship. Human ship. The White Panther comes. The alarm calls echoed through the fortress hive, causing panic among the insects. They had heard the stories, knew what happened to those who faced the dreaded human captain. Some tried to run, but Queen Voice Siktara's voice boomed through. The tunnels, stand and fight, you cowards. There's only one ship. But the Hivesworn warriors could feel their courage melting away. This was the White Panther, the Deathbringer himself. How could they hope to survive? The battle began with a flash of light that lit up the sky. The Baiko's weapons lanced down from orbit, striking the shield generators with surgical precision. The protective barriers flickered and died, leaving the fortress exposed. Corporal Nam Hai-1 led the first wave of human soldiers down from the assault shuttles. She was a tough woman who had fought in a dozen battles, but she felt the familiar. A rush of adrenaline as her boots hit the ground. Remember, she told her squad over the radio, we are here to rescue the slaves. Shoot any bug that gets in your way, but watch for civilians. The Hivesworn defenders met them at the main entrance, their weapons chattering as they fired into the human ranks. But the humans were ready, their armor turning aside the insect bullets as they advanced. Nam Hai-1's rifle barked as she shot down a Hivesworn warrior. The creature fell with a shriek, its green blood pooling on the red dust. Around her, the battle raged as humans and insects fought for control of the fortress. Push forward, she shouted. We need to reach the tunnels. High above the feathered wing, scouts circled the battle on their powerful wings. Their leader, Corette, watched the fighting with growing amazement. The humans moved like a pack of hunters, coordinated and deadly. They are not like the stories say, Corette called to his flight brothers. They are not mindless killers. Fight with purpose. But even as he spoke, fear gripped his heart. The White Panther's ship hung in the sky like a sword of judgment. What would happen when the terrible captain himself joined the battle? In the deep tunnels, Captain Duan moved like a shadow. He had come down in a separate shuttle, choosing to enter through a mining shaft far from the main battle. His plan was simple: reach the slaves before the insects could harm them. But the tunnels were a maze. The magnetic fields made his equipment unreliable. He moved carefully through the darkness, his weapon ready, listening for any sound that might lead him to the prisoners. Then he heard it, a soft crying, like a child in pain. Duan followed the sound through the winding passages, his heart pounding. With urgency, someone was in trouble, and he was the only one who could help. He did not know that his choice to go alone would change everything. In the darkness ahead, destiny was waiting. The tunnel shook like an angry beast. Captain Duan pressed himself against the stone wall as dust and rocks fell from the ceiling. The explosions above ground were getting closer, and the old mining shafts were not built to handle this kind of violence. Duan moved carefully through the darkness, his flashlight cutting through the gloom. The crying sound was getting louder now, and he could hear other voices too, scared voices speaking in languages he did not recognize. "Please," someone whispered in broken human speech. "Please help us." Duan's heart clenched. He had heard that tone before, the sound of people who had given up hope. But he was here now, and he would not let them down. He turned a corner and found them. Dozens of alien beings huddled together in a large cavern, their eyes wide with fear. They were all different species, tall ones with blue skin, small ones covered in fur, others that looked like living crystals. But they all had one thing in common: they were all slaves. "I am Captain Duan," he said in a loud, clear voice. "I am here to rescue you." The aliens looked at him with confusion. It heard of the White Panther, the terrible human who destroyed everything in his path. But this man spoke with kindness, not cruelty. An old alien with tentacles for arms stepped forward. "You are the White Panther," he said slowly. "The Deathbringer." "I am here to bring you life," Duan replied. "You follow me to the surface, and you will be free." The aliens began to murmur among themselves, hope beginning to replace fear. But then another explosion shook the tunnel, and this time it was much closer. Rocks crashed down from the ceiling, and Duan saw the tunnel entrance behind him collapse. "Move," he shouted. "This way." He led them deeper into the tunnels, looking for another way out. But the mine was old and unstable, and more sections were collapsing with each passing minute. They were trapped like rats in a maze. That was when he heard it, a small voice crying in the darkness ahead. It was the same sound that had led him here, but now it was closer. Much closer. Duan left the group with the old, tentacled alien and moved toward the sound. He found her in a side passage, half buried under fallen rocks. She was tiny, no bigger than a human child, with soft green skin and large golden eyes that glowed in the darkness. This was Soft Petal, though Duan did not know her name yet. She was hurt and scared, her small body shaking with fear and cold. When she saw the human approaching, she tried to crawl away, but the rocks held her trapped. "It is okay," Duan said softly, kneeling beside her. "I will not hurt you." Soft Petal looked at him with those huge golden eyes. She had never seen a human before, but she could feel something different about this one. He was not like the cruel insects who had taken her from her home. Duan carefully moved the rocks away from her small body. She was not badly hurt, just scared and tired. When he lifted her up, she was as light as a feather. Her people, the moss-touched, were not built for hard labor in dark tunnels. "What is your name?" Duan asked gently. The child did not understand his words, but she understood his tone. She whispered something in her own language, a word that sounded like wind through leaves. Another explosion rocked the tunnel. This time the ceiling above them began to crack. Duan looked back toward the other slaves, then at the child. In his arms, the passage back to the group was filling with falling rocks. He could not reach them in time, but he could save this one small life. Duan made a decision that would change everything. He took off his equipment harness and carefully secured the child to his back. She was so small and light that she barely added any weight, but he could feel her tiny hands gripping his uniform. "Hold on," he told her, even though she could not understand. "We are going home." The tunnel was collapsing around them as Duan began to climb. The mine had many levels, and he hoped that one of the upper passages would lead to the surface. The child on his back made no sound, but he could feel her breathing against his neck. Each step was a battle against falling rocks and shifting ground. Duan's training had taught him to move fast and strike hard, but now he moved with careful precision. Every movement had to be perfect because he was not just carrying himself anymore. The child's small hands touched his face, and he felt something he had not experienced in years. The complete trust of an innocent being. She was not afraid of him, even though everyone else in the galaxy was terrified of the White Panther. "You are safe," he whispered, not knowing if she could understand. "I promise." Above ground, the battle was ending. Corporal Namhai won, and her soldiers had fought their way through the hive-sworn defenses, but the cost had been high. Many of the tunnels had collapsed, and they had lost contact with their captain. "Sir," she called into her radio. "Captain Duan, please respond." Only static answered her. Namhai 1 felt fear growing in her chest. The White Panther was the strongest man she knew, but even he could not survive a mountain falling on top of him. "Keep searching," she ordered her squad. "He is down there somewhere." In the medical area, Specialist Okinme was treating the rescued slaves. The old tentacled alien told her about the human captain who had tried to save them all. He spoke with wonder about the kindness in the terrible White Panther's eyes. "He was not what we expected," the alien said. "He was not a monster at all." Deep underground, Duan climbed through a shaft that seemed to go on forever. The child on his back had fallen asleep, exhausted by fear and pain. He could feel her small body relaxing against his shoulders, trusting him completely. The shaft was getting brighter, and Duan realized he was almost at the surface. But then he heard voices above, hive-sworn warriors, probably guarding this exit. He would have to fight his way out, but not like before. This time he was not just a weapon, he was a protector. Duan drew his sidearm and climbed the last few meters. The insects were waiting for him, their mandibles clicking with anger. But when they saw him emerge from the shaft, they froze in shock. The White Panther, the most feared human in the galaxy, was carrying a small alien child on his back. The little one was sleeping peacefully, her tiny hand resting on his shoulder. It was the most unexpected sight in the universe. "Surrender," Duan said quietly, "and no one else has to die today." The hive-sworn warriors looked at each other in confusion. This was not the merciless killer they had expected. This was something else entirely. One by one, they dropped their weapons. Duan walked past them, toward the human lines, each step careful and measured. The child on his back slept on, safe at last. And somewhere in the distance, camera recorded everything. The image would spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. The White Panther, the Deathbringer, the terror of the void, carrying a small alien child to safety. In that moment, everything changed. The legend of the White Panther was being reborn. The image spread through the galaxy like wildfire. Every news network, every communication channel, every social media platform carried the same incredible picture. The White Panther, the most feared human in known space, gently carrying a small, alien child to safety. On the ocean world of Aquatica Prime, Ambassador Velnara stared at her screen in complete shock. The footage showed Captain Duan emerging from the ruined mine, moving with careful steps so as not to wake the sleeping child on his back. The little alien's hand rested trustingly on the human's cheek. "This cannot be real," Velnara whispered to her aide. "The White Panther does not save lives. He takes them."
Oh.
But the footage was real. It had been recorded by multiple sources, verified by independent observers. And even the hive-sworn survivors confirmed what they had seen. The terrible human captain had risked his own life to save one small child. Velnara swam in slow circles around her office, her mind racing. Everything she thought she knew about humans was wrong. If the White Panther could show such kindness, what did that say about the rest of his species? "Contact the Galactic Council," she told her aide. "Tell them we need an emergency session. Everything has changed." On the crystal world of Shard Home, the reaction was even more dramatic. The Shard speakers felt emotions through vibrations in their crystal bodies, And right now, every crystal in the city was singing a new song. It was not the song of fear they had grown used to. It was something else entirely. Elder Humka stood in the center of the great crystal chamber, feeling the vibrations flow through him. "The harmonics are changing," he said to the other elders. "The frequency of fear is being replaced by something new." "What is it?" asked another elder. Hope Humkas replied. "What?" "The crystals are singing of hope." The footage had reached them too, and the shard speakers were struggling to understand what they were seeing. The White Panther, who had destroyed so many criminal organizations, was now being seen as a protector rather than a destroyer. "Perhaps," said one of the younger crystals, "we have been wrong about the humans. Perhaps they are not the monsters we thought them to be." Back on the mining world of Kepler 4, for it to be, Captain Duan sat in the medical tent, watching as Dr. Oh Kyung-mi examined the child he had rescued. Soft Petal, as the other moss-touched survivors had told them she was called, was physically healthy but emotionally traumatized. "She will recover," Dr. Oh said softly. "Children are strong, but she will need time." Duan nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. He had received dozens of messages from Earth Command, from news reporters, from alien governments. Everyone wanted to know about the White Panther's moment of compassion. "Sir," said Corporal Namhai-1, entering the tent, "the rescued slaves are asking for you. They want to thank you personally." Duan stood up, but his eyes remained on the small alien child. She was awake now, looking at him with those large golden eyes. When she saw him, she smiled and reached out with her tiny hand. "She remembers you," Dr. Oh said with amazement. "She knows you saved her." Duan gently touched the child's hand with his finger. Her skin was warm and soft, like the petals of a flower. "She is so small," he said quietly. How could anyone hurt something so innocent? It was a question that would haunt him for the rest of his life. But it was also the question that would change everything. The news reached Earth within hours. In the underground military headquarters, Director Yoon Jae-soon read the reports with growing amazement. The alien communication networks, which had been full of fear and hatred toward humans, were now buzzing with confusion and curiosity. "Sir," said Lieutenant Han So-young, "we are receiving contact requests from over 50 different species. They all want to talk about Captain Duan and the child." Yoon leaned back in his chair. "What are they saying?" "They want to know if this is real," So-young replied. "They want to know if humans are capable of kindness as well as violence." Yoon looked at the image on his screen, the White Panther carrying the alien child to safety. It was the most powerful propaganda Earth had ever produced, and they had not even meant to create it. "Set up meetings," he ordered. "It is time we showed the galaxy who we really are." The first species to make contact was the Skydancers, a race of bird-like beings who had always been too afraid to approach humans. Their speaker of Linskrihala sent a message that was both formal and tentative. "We have seen the images of your White Panther," the message said. "We would like to know if there are more humans like him. If so, perhaps we can talk." Captain Jang Meekyung of the human diplomatic vessel Harmony received the message with joy. She had been trying to establish peaceful contact with alien species for years, but the White Panther's reputation had made her job impossible. Now suddenly, doors were opening. "Set course for the Skydancer homeworld," she told her crew. "We have a chance to make history." But not everyone was happy about the changing situation. In the dark corners of the galaxy, criminal organizations that had profited from the fear of humans were now facing a new problem. Species that had been too afraid to cooperate with human law enforcement were suddenly willing to work together. The reptilian scale-bearers, who controlled much of the illegal weapons trade, called an emergency meeting of their war council. Their leader Siskala was a veteran of many battles, and he understood the threat that peace posed to their operations. "The humans are becoming too popular," he hissed to his lieutenants. "If the galaxy stops fearing them, they will start trusting them, and trust leads to cooperation." "What do you suggest?" asked one of his war chiefs. "We remind the galaxy why they should fear humans," Siskala replied. "We attack their protected worlds, we force them to show their true nature." The scale-bearers began planning their assault, but they did not understand what they were truly facing. The White Panther's legend was changing, but his strength remained the same. And now he had something even more powerful than fear. He had the trust of those he protected. On Kepler 4-4 to B, the rescue operations continued. The freed slaves were being transported to safety, and many of them asked to speak with Captain Duan. Before they left, they wanted to thank the human who had saved them. Duan met with each group, listening to their stories and promising that they would be safe. But his mind kept returning to the small moss-touched child who had changed everything. "Sir," said Communications Officer Choi Yujin, "we are receiving thousands of messages from across the galaxy. Some are from governments, some from private citizens, but they all want to know the same thing." "What do they want to know?" Duan asked. "They want to know if you are real," Yujin replied. "They want to know if the White Panther truly has a heart." Duan looked out at the stars, where alien ships were beginning to gather. Some came in peace, others in curiosity, but none came in fear. The galaxy was changing, and he was the reason why. "Tell them," he said quietly, "that I am just a man who chose to protect a child. Nothing more, nothing less." But everyone who heard those words knew they were much more than that. They were the beginning of a new age. 6 months had passed since the rescue on Kepler 4 for 2b, and the galaxy barely looked the same. The image of the White Panther carrying little soft petal to safety had become the most famous picture in known space. It hung in government buildings, was painted on the sides of ships, and was even carved into the crystal walls of Shard-Home. Captain Duan stood on the bridge of the Baiko. But his ship was different now. Where once only humans had worked, now there were beings from a dozen different species. The bridge hummed with conversation in many languages, and the old atmosphere of fear had been replaced by something new, hope. "Captain," said Kernswift, the young tide swimmer who served as cultural liaison, "we are receiving a priority message from Earth Command." Duan nodded. Kernswift was the nephew of Ambassador Velnara, and his presence on the ship showed how much things had changed. The tide swimmers had gone from fearing humans to sending their own children to serve alongside them. "Put it through, Duan," said. The screen flickered to life, showing Director Yoon Jae-sung in his office on Earth. Behind him, Duan could see flags from dozens of different worlds. The old Earth Command had become something much larger. Captain Yoon said with a smile, "I have news. The Galactic Council has voted to accept humanity's application for membership. You are invited to attend the ceremony as our special representative." I felt a strange emotion in his chest. 6 months ago, the galaxy had trembled at the mention of his name. Now they were welcoming humans as equals. "What about the child?" Duan asked. "How is Soft Petal?" Yoon's smile grew wider. "See for yourself." The screen changed, showing a peaceful garden on a world Duan did not recognize. Among the green plants and flowing water, a small figure was playing. It was Soft Petal, but she looked different now. She was healthy and happy, her golden eyes bright with joy. "She has been appointed as the first interspecies youth ambassador," Yoon explained. "The moss-touched people are very proud of her." Duan watched the child play, remembering the frightened little being he had carried from the dark tunnels. She had grown so much, and not just in size. There was confidence in her movements now, and purpose in her actions. "Sir," said Park Sun-mi, "from her station, we are approaching the rendezvous point." Duan looked out at the stars ahead. A fleet was gathering there, but not a battle fleet. Ships from 20 different species floated together in peaceful formation. It was the first joint patrol in galactic history. "Take us in," Duan ordered. The Baiko moved toward the fleet, and Duan felt pride swell in his chest. No longer a weapon of fear. It was a symbol of cooperation and protection, but not everyone was happy about the changes. In the Outer Rim territories, the Scalebearers were preparing for war. War Chief Siskala had gathered the largest criminal fleet in history, determined to break the new alliance before it could grow stronger. "The humans have made the galaxy soft," he hissed to his assembled captains. "They speak of peace and cooperation, but we know the truth. We know that strength comes from fear, not love." The Scalebearers had chosen their target carefully, New Harmony, a colony world where humans and aliens live together. It was a symbol of everything Saskala hated about the new galaxy. "We will show them," he said, his reptilian eyes glittering with malice. "We will show them what happens when you trust the White Panther." On New Harmony, the warning came too late. The Scalebearer fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a storm cloud, their weapons already charging. The small defense force was overwhelmed in minutes, and landing craft began descending toward the surface. Commander Bei Sung-ho, who led the colony's defenses, sent out a desperate call for help. "This is New Harmony. You're under attack by Scalebearer. Forces, request immediate assistance." The message reached the Joint Patrol Fleet within minutes. Duan read the report with growing anger. The Scalebearers were attacking innocent civilians, trying to destroy everything he had worked to build. All ships, he broadcast to the fleet, set course for New Harmony. Maximum speed. The response was immediate. Human ships Tideswimmer, vessels, Skydancer, fighters, and even the massive Shard-Speaker crystal ships all turned toward the threatened world. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of species were working together to protect the innocent, but Duan knew they might be too late. New Harmony was far away, and the Scalebearers were not known for showing mercy. On the surface of New Harmony, the attack was brutal and swift. Scalebearer warriors stormed through the streets, destroying everything in their path. They had made one mistake. They had underestimated the people they were attacking. The colonists fought back with courage that surprised even themselves. Humans and aliens stood side by side, protecting each other's children, sharing weapons and supplies. The spirit of cooperation that the White Panther had inspired was stronger than the Scalebearers had expected. Lee Soo-jin, the cultural exchange officer who had been visiting the colony, organized the evacuation of the school. She led a group of mixed-species children to safety, remembering the lessons she had learned from watching Captain Duan. "Stay together," she told them. "Look after each other. We are all family here." The word spread through the colony like a battle cry. Humans, moss-touched, tide-swimmers, and others fought not as separate species, but as one people defending their home. When the joint fleet arrived, they found the Scalebearers in disarray. The defenders of New Harmony had held out longer than anyone thought possible, and the attackers were scattered and confused. "This is Captain Duan," the White Panther's voice echoed across all frequencies. "Scalebearer forces, you have attacked innocent civilians. Surrender now or face the consequences." Saskala laughed when he heard the transmission. "The famous White Panther," he hissed into his communicator. "Come and face me, human. Let us see if you are still the monster you once were." The battle that followed would be remembered for generations. The joint fleet moved like a single organism, each species contributing its unique strengths. The tide swimmers provided tactical coordination. The sky dancers offered speed and agility, the shard speakers brought powerful shields, and the humans delivered the decisive strikes. Duan led from the front, but he was no longer alone. Current Swift worked beside Park Sunmi at the tactical station. Crystal Song, a shard speaker engineer, helped Kim Tae-ho boost the ship's power systems. The crew of the Baiko had become a true family. The Scalebearer fleet, which had seemed so powerful, crumbled under the coordinated assault. Their ships were designed for raids and quick strikes, not for facing a united enemy. One by one, they fell or surrendered. Sisala's flagship was the last to fall. As the Scalebearer war chief was led away in chains, he looked at Duan with hatred in his reptilian eyes. "You think you have one," he snarled. "But this galaxy will never truly accept you. You are still killers. You are still monsters." Duan looked at the defeated criminal with something like pity. "Perhaps we were monsters once," he said quietly. "But we chose to become something better. That choice is always available, even to you." As the rescue ships landed on New Harmony, Duan watched humans and aliens working together to rebuild what had been destroyed. The children of different species played together in the ruins, their laughter echoing through the streets. A small hand tugged at his uniform, and Duan looked down to see a young, moss-touched boy. The child smiled up at him and offered him a flower he had picked from the rubble. "Thank you," the boy said in careful human speech. "Thank you for keeping us safe." Duan knelt down and accepted the flower. It was small and delicate, but it had somehow survived the battle, just like the hope it represented. "You are welcome," he said. "We are all family here." The words felt right. They felt true. The White Panther had found something better than fear. He had found love. 2 years had passed since that fateful day in the mining tunnels of Kepler-4 for to be, and the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. What had once been a collection of fearful, isolated species had become a thriving community of worlds working together for the common good. Admiral Li Duan stood on the observation deck of the new space station orbiting Kepler-4 for 2b, watching the celebration below. Today was the second annual Peace Day, and beings from across the galaxy had come to remember the moment that changed everything. The mining world had been completely transformed. Where once there had been dark tunnels filled with suffering, now there were schools and hospitals and parks. The planet had become a symbol of hope, a place where different species could live and work together in harmony. "Admiral," said a familiar voice behind him. Duan turned to see Soft Petal approaching, but she was no longer the frightened child he had carried from the tunnels. She was a young adult now, tall and graceful, with the natural wisdom of her people shining in her golden eyes. "Ambassador," Duan replied with a smile. "How are the preparations going?" Soft Petal had indeed become an ambassador, the youngest in galactic history. Her unique experience had given her insights that helped different species understand each other. She spoke 17 languages and had negotiated peace between worlds that had been enemies for centuries. "Everything is ready," she said, "though I think some of the older diplomats are still surprised that a former mining slave is now mediating disputes between star systems." Duan chuckled. "You have always surprised people. Even when you were small, you had more courage than beings 10 times your size." They walked together toward the main conference hall, where representatives from over 200 species were gathering. The Galactic Council had grown enormously since humanity joined, and the old ways of doing things had been swept away. "Do you ever regret it?" Soft Petal asked suddenly. "Giving up your reputation as the feared White Panther?" Duan considered the question. It was true that he was no longer the most frightening being in the galaxy. Pirates and slavers still feared him, but now ordinary citizens saw him as a protector rather than a threat. "No," he said finally. "Fear is a poor foundation for anything lasting. What we have built here is much stronger." In the conference hall, the ceremony was beginning. The assembled beings represented every corner of known space, the aquatic tide swimmers, with their shimmering scales, the crystalline shard speakers resonating with harmonic frequencies, the bird-like sky dancers with their magnificent wings, and dozens of others. At the center of it all sat the humans. It's no longer isolated, but integrated into the greater galactic community. Ambassador Park Ji-hoon gave the opening address, speaking of humanity's journey from feared outsiders to trusted allies. 2 years ago, he said, the galaxy knew humanity only through our military actions. They saw our strength, but not our compassion. One man changed that perception in a single moment of choice. The crowd turned to look at Admiral Duan, and he felt the weight of their attention. But it was not the weight of fear anymore. It was the weight of respect and gratitude. The White Panther's legend began with destruction, Park continued, but it was reborn through protection. Today we celebrate not just one man's choice, but the choice of an entire galaxy, to choose cooperation over conflict. After the ceremony, Duan found himself walking through the gardens that had been built on the site of the old slave quarters. Children of many species played together among the flowers, their laughter echoing through the peaceful air. Young officer Moon Dobbin approached him, her face filled with curiosity. She was fresh from the academy, part of the new generation that had grown up in this era of peace. "Sir," she said, "I have read all the reports about the old days, but I still do not understand. How did you find the courage to change everything?" Duan smiled at the question. It was one he heard often from young officers who could not imagine a galaxy divided by fear. "I did not change everything," he said. "I just made one choice. I chose to protect an innocent child instead of pursuing my mission. Everything else followed from that, but it must have been difficult, Moon insisted. It's to go from being feared to being trusted. Duan looked out at the stars, where human and alien ships patrolled together in perfect coordination. The joint fleet had grown to include over 50 species, all working together to keep the peace. The difficult part was not changing how others saw me, he said. The difficult part was changing how I saw myself. For years, I believed that strength came from being feared. I had to learn that true strength comes from being trusted. As the day's festivities continued, Duan received a priority message from Earth Command. Director Yoon Jae-sung appeared on the communication screen, his face serious but not alarmed. Admiral Yoon said, "We have a situation developing in the Outer Rim. A new species has been discovered, and they appear to be hostile. The advance. Scouts are requesting the presence of the White Panther." Duan felt the familiar stirring of duty, but it was different now. It was no longer a weapon to be pointed at enemies. He was a bridge builder, a protector of the innocent. "What do we know about them?" he asked. "Very little," Yoon replied. "They seem to be a warrior culture, and they have been attacking trade routes. But Admiral, there are reports of children among their forces. I think they might be refugees rather than conquerors." Duan nodded. "Prepare the Biko for departure, and assemble a diplomatic team. If these beings are truly refugees, they need help, not hostility." As he prepared to leave Kepler 44b, Duan took one last walk through the memorial garden. At its center stood a statue depicting the moment that had changed the galaxy. A human soldier carrying a small alien child to safety. The inscription below was written in dozens of languages. But the message was simple. Sometimes the greatest courage is choosing compassion over conquest. Softpedal joined him at the statue, looking up at the bronze figures with thoughtful eyes. "Do you think it will last?" she asked. "This peace we have built?" Duan considered the question. There would always be challenges, always be those who preferred the old ways of fear and division. But something fundamental had changed in the galaxy, something that could not be easily undone. "Look around you," he said, gesturing to the mixed species. Crews preparing their ships, the children playing together, regardless of their origins. The former enemies now working side by side. This is not something that was imposed from above. This grew from the bottom up, from ordinary beings choosing to trust each other. As the Biko prepared for departure, Duan took his place on the bridge. But it was not the same bridge he had commanded 2 years ago. Kernswift worked alongside Park Sunmi at the tactical station. Crystal Song harmonized with Kim Tae-ho to optimize the ship systems. Choi Yujin coordinated with communication. "Officers from a dozen different species. Set course for the Outer Rim," Duan ordered. "Let us go meet our new neighbors." The ship moved away from Kepler 44b, but it did not travel alone. A small fleet accompanied it, tide swimmer vessels with their fluid grace. Sky dancer fighters dancing through space, and the massive crystal ships of the shard speakers singing their harmonic songs as they entered hyperspace. Duan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He had begun as the White Panther, a name whispered in fear across the galaxy. But that fear had been transformed into something greater, hope for a future where all beings could live together in peace. The stars streaked past the viewport. Somewhere ahead, a new species waited to be contacted. They might be hostile or friendly, refugee or conqueror. But whatever they were, they would be met not with fear and violence, but with an open hand and an offer of friendship. The White Panther's roar had once struck terror into alien hearts. Now it called the galaxy to something greater: unity, protection, and hope for all sentient beings among the stars in the end. That was the true legacy of the White Panther. Not the enemies he had defeated, but the friends he had made. Not the fear he had inspired, but the trust he had earned. Not the destruction he had caused, but the peace he had helped to build. The galaxy would remember the moment when the most feared human in known space chose to cradle a lost child on his back. And in remembering, they would be reminded that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the entire universe. The White Panther's legend would live forever, but it would be a legend of hope, not fear. And that, Duan thought as he watched the stars go by, was exactly as it should be.